Our speaker tonight is Andrew Johnson, who's been on TV and on the Open University and doing a lot of lecturing and a lot of information dissemination. At the back of the room there's pamphlets and CDs that he's produced, so please have a look at them. Part of the talk tonight is Chemtrails. We were going to do this talk a few months ago when Judy Wood came, so I really wanted you to see it. I saw it a while ago on Paradigm Shift TV, and it's intelligent, it's well researched, and as I said, it's another subject where once you ask one question you find that you're in a place where they're genetically engineering our children via sky spray. You know, these things are worth addressing, and this is the best way to get that information to you, is through Andrew's work.
An obscure part of the investigation. The inhabitants referred to as the planet Earth.
How peaceful it looks.
Most effective, Your Majesty. Will you describe this Earth?
Later. I like to play with things a while before annihilation.
Seemed like a frivolous way to start the talk, but I found that it does kind of wake people up and put a smile on their face, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. And one of the really shocking things about that piece of film is it's now over 30 years old, because that was from 1980. So in this presentation, you know, you might think, well, that's just a silly science fiction film, you know, with sort of vaguely reasonable special effects and a reasonably good budget. But if you go and look at that Flash Gordon film, you'll find there's actually a lot of Masonic symbolism throughout the movie, which is quite interesting to go and look at it. But in this presentation I'm going to try and, I'll maybe skip over some things depending on time because there's quite a lot of information in this talk. We're going to look at chemtrails. I'll try and give you the information. I still don't know what they really are, but I'll show you my sort of ideas on that. We're going to look at weather modification research, which I think is somehow connected to chemtrails, but maybe not in the way that people try to say mostly. We're going to look at this fellow, which some people have heard of, Wilhelm Reich, and orgone energy, which is another interesting thing, which is quite well known, but somehow not connected into this topic very much as it might be. And cloudburst is what he came up with. Evidence for weather modification in action, which you will have seen some of last time we were here on 9/11, for example, which is at the bottom there. And we're going to look at legislation which explicitly mentions weather modification and/or chemtrails, which has actually become even more prevalent now in the last couple of years. So starting off on the idea of chemtrails, what are they? Where does the word come from, for those that are new to this? It's a word which I think is derived from the chemical trail, fairly obvious really. Some people prefer to call it an aerosol. This is a term that Clifford Carnicom uses, I'll mention him in a minute. And a persistent jet trail is another term that's used to describe these things. And they're often, if you use chemtrails, it's automatically dubbed a conspiracy theory, you know, by any sort of mainstream scientist or source claiming to be some kind of authority on the weather or climate. They are real, there's something going on, these are real things, you can observe these yourself. Something strange is going on, despite what authorities try to tell us there's nothing going on. I don't believe that. The history seems to, they are thought to have begun to appear in the mid-1980s to early 90s. That's when they seem to become more prevalent. Some people suggest there's a coincidence with the starting up of the budget airlines around that time, because quite a few of them started in Europe. I don't know about the US so much when the budget airlines started, probably earlier in the 90s. But The purpose really is unknown, but what's been put forward is weather modification. They used to modify the weather. Bio-warfare, as I think Andy was alluding to in the introduction partly. Atmospheric modifications change properties or introduce aerosols to suppress immunity, affect crop yield and reduce biodiversity. These are sort of things which are said that chemtrails are for. But actually when you look at this, there's very little direct information available outside your own personal observation and the odd rumour. And I'm going to cover some of those rumours. And I can show and prove to you tonight that disinformation regarding chemtrails is actually being put out, which makes me pretty convinced that something really is going on, even if it's not entirely clear what it is. Now, over the last few years, I've researched this topic, on and off. I've done a lot of 9/11 research, which has kind of dominated a lot of what I've done. But I've corresponded or looked at the research of Clifford Carnicom. I've corresponded with Rosalind Peterson, who I'll mention later. She's in a video clip if we get time to show it. Phil Morris, he was formerly, well actually this slide's out of date because now he's back in the UK. He woke up to the chemtrail issue probably a couple of years before I did, and he started writing letters and stuff around about 2003, 2004 to try and get some answers about these trails. William Thomas has written a book called Chemtrails Confirmed. I'm not quite sure where he stands on certain things. There's another chap I came into contact with called Wayne Hall in Greece, who has been trying to get his local council to look at the chemtrail issue. And one of the prominent figures that's now sort of faded into the background a bit is Scott Stevens, who was a TV weatherman in Idaho, and he actually came out and did a whole website about chemtrails and such, and he came up with some very interesting stuff, particularly his analysis of some of the satellite photographs, of which I've got one or two in tonight's presentation. But we'll start off to show you that I do actually know something about aircraft trails and such. I'm not an expert, but my background is in software engineering. Part of my degree was in physics, and when you do A-level physics you cover things like fluid flow. I did A-level chemistry as well, so you learn about things like alkanes, alkenes and alkynes, which are organic gases. But kerosene, which is what is used in aircraft fuel, is classed as a hydrocarbon. It mainly contains alkanes, which are saturated carbons, which are made up of carbon, approximately 85%, hydrogen, approximately 12%, and there are some other compounds in kerosene which contain nitrogen and sulfur, approximately 1% and 2% each respectively. When kerosene burns, therefore, it can only form compounds that contain elements that were originally in the kerosene or in the air that it burns in. Not surprisingly then, the main compounds that form when kerosene burns are carbon dioxide, this infamous greenhouse gas which we all breathe out, which has been rammed into our consciousness over the last 20 years, for certain reasons it seems, not the truthful ones of course. Sulfur dioxide in small quantities is a toxic greenhouse gas which mixes with water to form acid rain. I don't know if you remember in the 80s particularly there was this big sort of say, oh, you know, all our industrial activity in the UK is killing all the forests in Norway because all the clouds of pollution are going across, forming acid rain and dissolving all the sort of leaves on the trees and such like. And then also carbon monoxide is also formed, and you get, this is a toxic flammable gas which is responsible for some of the deaths which happen when your gas heating goes faulty. And that's when the fuel isn't completely burned, you get some carbon monoxide formed. And also of course you get water. That's one of the byproducts. So, but let's look at those substances. When you look at each one of these compounds, in other words water, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide, they are without exception colourless compounds. Okay? So when kerosene burns, it would seem that the only visible thing we should see in the sky is the condensation, which like our breath on a cold day should disappear in a few tens of seconds. So in other words, if you're walking around on a cold day and you're breathing out, your breath isn't disappearing after 1 or 2 seconds. There's something strange going on, and you can then extend that into the upper atmosphere. It's not actually condensation of water droplets, it's ice crystals which form. And it used to be the case, or it seemed to be the case, that these trails would disappear within 1 to 2 minutes, because the hot gases would then cool down, and the ice crystals would then sublime into the atmosphere and fade away. And indeed, on certain days, you'll still see that exact thing. You'll notice, when we had it the day a couple of weeks ago, beautiful, clear, blue skies. You didn't even know there were any aircraft in the sky. You didn't see one trail all day. Not one trail that lasted any more than just the time you were looking at it. But on other days, well, you'll see what you need to know what we're seeing. I'll show you some pictures. And in fact, this time-lapse clip that I've got really proves the sorts of things you should be seeing. You're seeing the clouds sort of billowing, forming, reforming. You're seeing these little streaks going across. The light on this isn't great. But you see these little streaks going off, and because this is time-lapse, of course, that you've seen many times, you can see these trails fading off. No problem, great stuff. That is essentially what is supposed to happen. Normal behaviour of the trails, no problem. That's what you should be seeing. However, we have another clip here. And here we see a trail. This is just looped. I've looped this. So we have an aircraft going across here. And there goes the trail, and with it being time-lapse, you see it disappear. But what's this? Oh dear. I've slowed this down here on the time-lapse. This X shape is staying there. This is the same day, same part of the sky. Surely some similar type of aircraft. That trail disappears. These two stay, and they're also in a cross. Why is that? Why is that? So this begs a question which no one will answer. The only answer you will get if you write to any official body, a university, a climatologist, they'll say, well, it's just local conditions. It's just the conditions of the jet stream. For example, they may explain that by saying, well, those planes were obviously at 40,000 feet. That one was a bit lower at 30,000 feet. And that's why those trails are stable. But why are those two in an X? I'm not sure I'm entirely happy with this explanation. I've got some more evidence later on as to why that's the case. The other thing that you'll tend to see, and I've seen this on Joe DeMio's website, and he said that chemtrails they are ordinary aircraft trails because, for example, you get pictures like this cited. B-17 bombers over Europe, 1943. Lots of ordinary persisting contrails, but no chemtrails. And that's the sort of typical statement you get. But there's some problems here because this was 60 years ago. This was wartime, and these are flying in formation. This is not like comparable to ordinary civilian air traffic. And also due to different types of engine, different fuel composition and so on, probably not as pure as it is now. So it's not a fair comparison. And it's certainly not a fair comparison in all cases, maybe in some. So again, I've just collected a few photographs, and these, you know, I get these sent these more or less every week now, and I really don't know what to do with them. I get my mailbox overloaded with these on some days when somebody notes them for the first time. But you have to think, well, is this really civilian air traffic that's causing this? That we're getting, the civilian air traffic is lining up in these lanes like this in sufficient numbers. And this is from Battle Creek, Michigan in 2004. And then you get these tic-tac-toe grids. This was on February 18th, 2003. It's not often you see these, but you do see them with some regularity. Maybe, you know, if you were to look out every day, you'd probably see these 3 or 4 times a year. And this was from somebody called Sean in Las Vegas, so that's in the USA. Now, the other interesting thing is that you can see these things from space. And you can actually make some measurements because they're from satellite images, and I did this for some part of a report I compiled about this, which I've got copies of on the table there. This was from Jeff Challenger's website, and he says, well, look, you know, you can see these grid patterns, and you've got all these aircraft trails, and he argues that you've got such a lot of mass of material here that this simply can't come from ordinary air traffic. So there's something strange going on. Something strange going on here with this. Now, this picture here really kind of illustrates something that I've come to call chemtrail blindness. Because if you maybe go out tomorrow morning and you see these trails appearing in the sky, and sometimes they start in the morning, sometimes they start halfway through the day. There doesn't seem to be much of a pattern to it that I've been able to establish, although I'm wanting to do some more research to work on that. I just haven't had the time, frankly. But this picture I took in 2003, and the reason why I took it was because of this thing in the middle here, this sort of orangey coloration. That's called a sundog, and that's caused when you get the refraction of the light from the sun at an angle of 22.5 degrees from the main disk of the sun, and you get ice crystals reflecting and refracting the light, so you get this rainbow effect. That's what I was photographing because I thought, well, you don't often see these sundogs; they're quite rare. But actually now, if you keep watching, you'll see them with quite considerable regularity in the middle of these trails. I didn't even notice these. They've got 3 trails here, look. Never even noticed it. I was just looking at that. I never even noticed these 3 parallel trails sticking out. And this is what the state that most people are in. Oh, those are just aircraft trails. We get aircraft going over. What's the big deal? Forget it. Go back to sleep. You know, it's nothing. You're just making things up. It's just, you know, it's just a conspiracy and so on. And that's typically the reaction you will get. Now, one interesting sort of day of study that we did, say we, just a few interested people and myself, and I've got a specific page on this on my website, because what actually happened was we had a huge day of training across the UK. You can see all these. This was taken in Keighley by somebody that I know. I was driving on that day to see students, because I go and see students occasionally around the country, mainly in Leicester actually, in Leicester today. I drove from Derby to Leeds on that day, and I saw these trails all the way from when I got the hire car from Derby, and I drove right to Leeds, and I took pictures in Leeds. I've got a page on my website, and then what we did was, the next day or 2 days afterwards, we went onto this MODIS satellite, where you can get real colour images, and you can see the trails from space. These trails are huge. But there's still no explanation as to why we're getting these trails so massively on some days and not others, except to say it's, I don't know how it's called. I must have, I think I got inserted by accident. And then we've got ones like this. This is from my friend Alan Cruikshank in the Pyrenees. I think he's back in the UK now. Did the pilot forget his sandwiches or something? You know, we've got to go back. What the hell is going on there? And this is a sequence of 5 or 6 shots that he took. So this, I don't know what's going on there. I mean, is it some military flying exercise? I don't know. Maybe it is just that. Maybe there's nothing unusual there. But it looks a bit strange to me. And not only that, that was in the middle of the Pyrenees, and you can imagine somewhere like the middle of the Pyrenees, that would be a place where they might conduct military exercises. Fair enough, you know. But and then I've got some more. I've got some more circles later on, which I'll show you. I've got them in the right file loaded. I've got this one from the Lake District. This takes 6 years ago now. It's in the middle of the Lake District. And that's my friend in MC. I grew up in Skipton. Empsey's just the sort of next one of the next towns along. And my friend happened to be in his garden. Thought, oh, that's a bit strange. It's got this little line going across here, and then all these trails going into a grid. What's that all about? Paris. Another friend in Paris. And this was the one that really, I suppose, woke me up in 2005, because I was just typing away at some emails, looked out my little office window thing that I'd got, and that was looking towards Derby, looking to the west, and that was the site that greeted me just before sunset. 9:45 PM on the 10th of June, that's what I saw. And I think, there we go, 9 separate trails intersecting, which means I must have 9 aircraft over me in the time that it took for those trails to disappear, at least 9. So, an awful lot of aircraft. Well, no, I didn't see them going backwards and forwards. I didn't see them, possibly, but I didn't see them. Other people apparently have. I've got some other pictures. And then you get other effects. Again, I'm just sifting through things. You see this line here, this is something I started noticing, other people have pointed it out to me. Got a trail here, and then this sort of weird, like ghost trail or shadow. I mean, is this purely the angle of the sun? You know, the sun was, this was about, taking about 11 o'clock in the morning, I think, so the sun was, let's see, where we're February, so the sun was still fairly low in the sky, you know. What's all, is this a shadow, is it? Again, when you look at this, you think, well, it's got to be a shadow, but it can't be. It doesn't look like a shadow. And then we've seen other ones from time to time like this that somebody captured. I've seen 1 or 2 pictures like this. Well, they take this picture off their website now. Is this a stealth plane? A set of, you know, trail with no plane at the end? I mean, what's that all about? You know? I'm thinking, well, is the exposure just slightly wrong and you know, it's, the camera's not picked up the plane? No. Maybe it is a Photoshop job, that's another possibility. I don't know. Now this one as well, another unusual pattern. People again have said, well, it's just military jets on a manoeuvre. Why? This was over Llanberis, Blaen Festiniog, a couple of years ago. This got posted on David Icke's website. Dave Ellis took this, a chap that I know lives up near Manchester. So what's this picture about? And this is all I wanted to show you, because before I talked a few minutes ago, I showed you the picture from the Pyrenees, which was this one here, but from that sequence. But I was actually very naughty because I was driving across the Humber Bridge in 2007 and I had to have my digital camera by the seat so that you can see this semicircle here, so this was quite near the Humber estuary. So I was just about, I think it was about a mile from the Humber Bridge when I took that picture. And then somebody sent me this from Edinburgh, see another circle, and then somebody sent me this from Harrogate. What's going on with these circular trails? It's all a bit peculiar to me. I don't have an answer for you, I'm just showing you the oddities here. There's something going on with these trails. And then it was my daughter who, we were just about to go out to school in the morning, do the school run. And my daughter says, Dad, come and look here, there's something weird. She says, what is it? I don't know, it's weird, she said. And this is out of my daughter's bedroom window. So, hang on a minute, we've got this low cloud and a plane is going through it. Is this it then? The plane is leaving a gouge in the cloud or something? I mean, what's going on here? I don't have an answer for you, and again, this is, I found out the name for this is a disk trail. Here we've got a plane apparently has gone through a layer of cirrus cloud and actually left an chemtrail, as I called it. You know, but apparently there is a name for it, it's a disk trail. You know. And then the other thing that I started noticing, which there seems to be some relationship with it, again it's not clear, I just call them straight line clouds, and again they have names for them, they call them shell clouds and stuff. This isn't particularly clear on this projector, the projector colour range isn't as high as what's on the laptop screen. But this is actually a rainbow. You can see some of the rainbow effects has got a bit washed out here and stuff, but I think it's these DLP projectors, they're not quite as good colour reproduction. But you can see this rainbow effect here. This isn't really what it looked like, you have to look at the website. But it was like a straight line. It was a rainbow that was a straight line, not a curve. It was a straight line. And then you have these sunbeams coming through it. And the thing here was, that lasted for about 15 minutes. It wasn't just there for like 1 minute. It was 15 minutes this lasted. And then we've got these sorts of clouds. It looks like these clouds are all disappearing to a vanishing point in a straight line. It's like, you know, it's like pickup sticks, or somebody's dropped 3 pencils together and they're all pointing into one. What's going on? And then this was outside the school one day. I had the camera. I think I'd been to the school play or something. And I had the camera, and I mean, you've got this straight. And if you watch, you'll see these now. There's like sheer edge clouds, and they call them shelf clouds and stuff. I never remember. I don't know about you. I mean, maybe it's just me by poor memory, but I don't remember seeing clouds like this
over the summer, particularly in July and all the summer holidays, it came over Druids Heath on a late Sunday afternoon, and you could see all these dead straight trails, and then for 3 or 4 days you got these like tiny circular clouds. It was just one mass.
And I think if you watch the sky, you'll see these sorts of things happening.
And it didn't tend to clear up till late Thursday, Friday.
And you seem to get several days where that might happen. And here we've got a chemtrail.
And then Sunday it started again.
Yeah. And here we've got a chemtrail, which is, if you look at it, I don't know whether it's actually perpendicular to that front. It may not be because it's difficult to tell from the ground, but potentially that is perpendicular. So there's something strange. And then this was another one. This was a Christmas Day, and it was just this sheer edge, like knife edge of cloud, right over Derby, almost oriented, almost north-south. Sometimes you see these cloud lines actually oriented specifically north-south, you know, almost dot on. And I've noticed this on a few days. And then I've just got another clip here. Again, I'm just flipping through things quickly. This, to attempt to make some measurements just to confirm, I just did a time-lapse webcam. This is pretty easy to do. You just get a webcam. This is the low-quality webcam. I made this is 6 years ago now almost. So I got the thing time-stamped with a webcam, so it was easy to actually measure how long this trail lasted, or give it a minimum figure without having to sit there with a stopwatch. I could definitely time it. So that was basically showing that the chemtrail was lasting, I think, at least 18 minutes, probably much longer. So at least 18 minutes is what measurement I made, but other people have measured them for an hour before these things dissipate. So there's something very strange going on. Now, potentially what I would suggest to people is that why there is something different between what people call contrails and what people call chemtrails. These are 6 things which I think would distinguish them. The visibility of trails on satellite photos, you should never really be able to see contrails on satellite photographs, but you can on certain days, not every day. The time of persistence, which we've already discussed, I've got a report by Professor Ulrich Schumann of the Institute of Atmospheric Physics about the formation of contrails, and it's a very sort of wavy report. It's not if you read it, it's not much. It's not very good, basically. And the only figure that it gives for the persistence of chemtrails is 2 minutes, and all the other figures are like, it might be this long depending on these conditions. It might be that long. We don't really know, and you can read this, and it doesn't really give you a definite answer. Irregular pattern of appearance, for example, you think, for example, if you live quite near an airport or within a flight path, I've been trying to measure this more now, which I'll come to later. You probably have a fairly regular weekly schedule of flights. You might have slightly more flights on Tuesday or on a Friday or something for the weekend. And on those days, therefore, you would expect to see more aircraft trails above you. If there was, but if you look out on one Friday and then the next Friday, you'd think the chances were that the Friday would have more trails, say, or less trails. But it doesn't work like that. Again, if you try and look at the pattern, there's no pattern to it. And again, the height of appearance of trails, for example, I showed you that picture that my daughter highlighted me to, which was in low cloud. We've got this trail in low cloud. That's way too low to be a contrail. Way too low, because contrails only form above 26,000 feet. Right? Below that, the air is too warm, and the conditions are not. You cannot form trails. But if you go, and this has now changed, because if you go and write to the CAA, Civil Aviation Authority, they will claim that a trail can form at ground level now, according to something that I said that they sent out a couple of years ago, which is ridiculous. And then you get these broken trails. I mean, this also is odd. I mean, again, I'd like someone to explain this to me properly, because here we've got a trail, then we've got this sort of shadow effect, and then no trail, and then the trail again. I mean, this is all very peculiar. Now, of course, again, a climatologist would tell you, well, actually, Andrew, there's nothing unusual about that, because what's here is a bit of cloud, so the vapour pressure or the amount of humidity there is higher, so that's why there's no trail or something like that. I don't know, maybe that's true, but I'm not sure I buy that in all cases. Now, another little interesting clip surfaced, and there's a bit of an interesting story about it. I'll just show you this bit of a clip. Oops, hang on, I've got a clip that I didn't get to play. Now, the story behind that clip is itself interesting. That appeared on YouTube in July 2010, as I put there, and it created quite a stir. Think, look, we've definitely got film of playing chemtrail, absolutely proof positive, slam dunk, and all of that. But it was posted by somebody who had a username of USAFFEKC10. right? And that's a bit of a mouthful, but what that means is obviously US Air Force, everyone knows that. FE, front end, as in the pilots, and KC-10, which is a military version, I think, of a Boeing 757, I think, or 767. It's a military tanker. So this guy, whose name was Tim, he claimed that he was on a flight to somewhere, and he filmed this plane in front of him, a military plane, chemtrail. That was his story. And that was basically what he put on the YouTube video. And then everyone says, oh, you know, flipping out, that's proof, you know, that you've given us the proof that we need, thanks very much. And then about 3 or 4 days later, when all this, you know, flap had started, he then said, actually, I was just, you know, extracting the Michael, because it's all it is just an ordinary fly, and it's not chemtrail at all, and I fooled you. And then he deleted the video off the internet. I sent him a message because, again, I'm sort of still trying to be sceptical on this. I'm still not sure what chemtrails are, and I'm still not sure all the stories you hear are true, which is why I can repeatedly say there's something going on, but I don't know what it is. And I think what could possibly be happening in this instance is that the plane is just at that level, around about 26,000 feet, which is the boundary between where the contrail would form and then you get no contrail. And it's maybe going through a layer of extra moisture. You notice there's some cloud below the aircraft, and it may be that is just a normal trail forming and then sort of not forming because it's just at that boundary level. And I wrote to the guy and I said, you know, can you tell me if that's what's happening? He basically deleted his channel, so he never responded. Well, initially he never responded to the message. And I also asked him where he was going. Could he reveal any details about the flight he was on? Because he was a military pilot. You know, was he flying into the USA, out of the USA? You know, could he reveal any details about the aircraft, the flight, anything? But it seemed odd to me that he would risk. I mean, I don't think they would be allowed to film when they're on a military mission because of security, you know, reasons. It would seem odd to me that he would film that and then post it on the internet under the threat of disciplinary action and then just delete it as a joke. The whole thing just didn't, there was something going on there, I think, which wasn't fully explained. I never got to the bottom of it. But again, that's just to show you that somebody is willing to sort of mess about with this issue. And now this one, let's just see if this will come up. This is an interesting clip. That was filmed by the guy who made the film Don't Talk About the Weather, which I've got some DVDs about there, which he filmed that sometime after he filmed that original film, which is quite interesting. So I don't know quite what's going on in that clip. It really does look like something is being sprayed, but it's not quite the same as what we see every day, because again, you know, again that was a turboprop plane that you saw there, rather than a regular jet. So again, no clear answers. And this is just, again, another example of this weird shadow, where we seem to have this shadow here in front, and then a shadow from the trail. And this was from somebody's Flick art collection. I think it's still on the internet. I've got the links there. So, again, he noticed, while flying to Alaska on 7/23/07, I had a close encounter with a chemtrail plane. It looked like it was going to cross the path of our plane, and then it veered left and went right by the side of our plane. And this is all he says. After it passed us, it looked as if something may have been spraying out of our plane for a short while, as if there was something passed onto his plane, which I don't understand. I've not heard of that before. But he's got a whole sequence of these pictures, and it does look peculiar. It does look peculiar. I mean, again, you know, people would argue, well, Andrew, it's just nothing really, because you've got a layer of cloud here, and you know, you've got the sun above, so it's just casting a shadow. And I'm not sure. Now, some people may have noticed that chemtrails have got some TV news coverage from time to time. This is one.
Tonight, a community in the San Bernardino Mountains has a real mystery on its hands. The official explanation here is that jet contrails are causing strange lines in the sky, and that it's pollen making people sick on the ground. But others are convinced it is something else, and they ask, is the government experimenting with our weather?
There was a huge dust cloud.
Longtime Cedar Glen resident Gretchen Sherman says she has never seen anything like it.
How big was it?
Oh, it covered the entire Cedar Glen area.
A cloud of dust, leaving a sticky yellow slime all over her car. It happened again last February, and calls began pouring into the local Alpenhorn newspaper.
And they had a tremendous upsurge of children that were not going to school at that time.
Pharmacist Ed Burrows says it is the most mysterious illness he's seen in 22 years on the mountain.
A lot of eye infection problems, upper respiratory problems, nosebleeds.
The nearby March Air Force Base say it didn't come from them. Others said it was a pollen cloud. The Department of Health found a yellowish tint on a tissue submitted for testing. But, quote, there was no sign of any biological form, such as cedar pollen, and the test was ruled inconclusive. And it wasn't long before things ballooned into a sky-high mystery.
The story is not just here in Crestline in the alleged yellow cloud. People say the government is up there in airplanes spraying all kinds of chemicals to change or manipulate the weather, leaving what you see there, and they call that a chemtrail. So when I look up there and I think are contrails, you're telling me are chemtrails?
Yes, that a contrail would be dissipated by now.
It would?
Yes, it would.
Chemtrails. On the internet, they are cited as proof of the government creating clouds to combat global warming. In response, the Air Force says that, quote, there is no such thing as a chemtrail. The actual contrails are a safe and natural phenomenon. And that people are seeing more contrails simply because there are more jets forming large clouds, depending on weather conditions, as in this video of alleged chemtrails shot near San Francisco.
I think these are contrails.
Professor Gregory Benford of UC Irvine works with the Department of Energy on weather research.
That's very odd. They could be very large contrails.
He says the DOE doesn't know of any jets spraying chemicals to affect the weather. However, he says we will probably see it in the near future.
You've got to, in a sense, engineer all these so you get the right kind of clouds for the effects we want.
It is called geoengineering, fighting global warming by putting a chemical dust in the atmosphere and reflecting harmful radiation back into space.
You could use barium oxide, for example, which makes big fluffy clouds. You could use tiny little bits of aluminum, which is benign in the environment, and essentially manage the climate.
And what I found was unusual spiking since the early 1990s in barium, aluminum.
But Rosalind Peterson of California Skywatch says health department records show a sharp increase in both chemicals in the water supply of Northern California, dating from the time the huge contrails first appeared over her home in Mendocino County.
What's the significance of the barium and the aluminum?
I went and got all the tests, and all these things in the same test would be up way over state and federal standards. This had to be airborne, because how could it get to such diverse regions of our county? We have jets going in every direction. X's, east, west, north, south, circles. There is something going on in the air. I don't know exactly what, but I think there's some experimentation.
Is it legal?
I don't know, because we haven't had a public discussion.
But what is unknown today may be actual fact tomorrow, thanks to a bill soon to be voted on in the U.S. Senate, a Weather Modification Act, calling for research in, quote, attempting to change or control by artificial methods the natural development of atmospheric cloud forms.
Doesn't it seem to you that they're going to be doing it in the future for sure?
Yes. And if they are, I want to know about it.
In the meantime, a lot of people are wondering if they'll ever get clear skies and a clear answer.
The legislation is there, therefore somebody's thinking about this. How does this make sense?
I don't know, maybe they're practicing.
Over Cedar Glen, over Arrowhead.
I guess you have to try it out before you use it. I'm not sure.
Well, you be the judge. We'll keep you posted on anything further on this story, and there will be more, that's for sure. More information on the weather modification proposals, check on our website, nbc4.tv.
And that's, as you see, 5 years old since that was broadcast. It was actually, if you go onto the YouTube, you'll find a follow-up broadcast of that as well. They did do a follow-up. And we're going to talk a bit more about geoengineering later. So we haven't had coverage like that here, and of course he pointed out that it seemed to be he was trying to imply that it was local, local to that area where that broadcast was made in California. But no, it's not. We get it here too. So this seems to be happening on a global scale. It was mentioned there about somebody writing to the Air Force, and this was done originally, you see, 21st of December 2000 by Clifford Carnicon. He wrote to the EPA, and there's another letter that somebody else wrote to the Air Force around the same time, and the wording of the response is quite interesting. This is interesting too. The EPA is not involved in or aware of any application of aerial spraying of chemical, biological or toxic substances as claimed by your past correspondence or on the above or other websites. And the agency takes very seriously its mission to protect human health. So it says, is not involved in or aware of any application of aerial spraying. The wording is, I think, is chosen quite carefully. In other words, they're not saying it's not happening, it's just saying we're not aware of it and we're not involved in it. I think that's an important distinction. And then Joanne Meehan, which I think she wrote to the Air Force and asked about this, and this again is going back over 10 years now. And this is a response from the Air Force. The term chemtrail is a hoax that began circulating approximately 4 years ago, which is interesting, 1997, from that date, which asserts the government is involved in a joint federal programme of covert spraying of the general public. The chemtrails are most often described as unusual contrails or contrail patterns seen coming from military and civilian aircraft. The chemtrail hoax has been investigated and refuted, it says, by many established and accredited universities, scientific organisations and major media publications. Has it? Oh, well, maybe you could name some of them that have actually done that then. So the Air Force don't in that letter. So that's typical of the sort of response you get. And parallels my own experience some years later coming to this, probably 5-6 years on from that. Because in June 2007, having sort of come across some of the information I've already shown you, some of which I've come across since I did this report, I decided I would write and compile this information into a 20-page document, and I sent it to the Department of Environment, Civil Aviation Authorities, Royal Air Force, Greenpeace, World Wildlife Fund, just trying to get an answer to what is going on with these trails. We need some answers because something is going on. I've got a few copies here, as I said, of this report. There's some bits I've added to it, some bits I probably would change now, knowing a little bit more than I did then. But I've got a few copies here you can download from my website, check the evidence. But basically, what actually happened was I wrote to the Department of Transport as well, because they're being involved with air traffic. They're interested in this. And it was from this guy, Roger Worth, at the Department of Transport, that he said, yes, we've received your query about aircraft trails, and actually what you should do is look at this report, which is about contrail formation. This is one I mentioned earlier in the talk. It's called Formation Properties and Climatic Effects of Contrails. So he sent me the link, I downloaded it, and that 26-page study, of which about 4 pages are just references, includes no stated maximum figure of contrail persistence. So in other words, you won't find anywhere in that document, well actually, a contrail can persist for 60 minutes under these conditions of this level of humidity, this wind direction, this temperature, this landscape. You won't find any of that at all in the document. It talks about contrail formation being linked to cirrus cloud formation. Cirrus is the high type of cloud that you get, the sort of wispy cloud high up. But it states there is no proven link between them. Actually, if you read carefully, it seems to contradict itself. It does indeed discuss persistent contrails, but does not explain why they form, and the duration of their persistence is not discussed in detail or with any empirical data. It mentions the standard contrail duration of formation of maximum of 2 minutes in one page, and it states that ice supersaturation in the atmosphere may be the cause of persistent contrail formation, but no firm link is documented or established. In other words, basically what it says in the report is, well, we found this phenomenon called ice supersaturation in the atmosphere, which was measured with LIDAR, which is like a type of radar that uses lasers. And then it says that a figure of 150 kilometres is quoted for the maximum region of ice supersaturation. But I measured contrails that are over 300 kilometres long on a satellite picture. You can do that yourself. Only one ordinary optical photo in the whole report, the 26-page report. So you've seen all the photos I've shown you. None of those are in that report. There's nothing like it. No time-lapse studies. I used a £5 webcam and some free software to do time-lapse. Easy. They don't do that. He doesn't do that. I've gone on from that a little bit as well. So I had a bit of a ding-dong with this Roger Worth guy, and then the outcome was pretty predictable. There is simply no evidence of unknown aerosols being covertly sprayed, covertly introduced to claim otherwise is distorting the facts. So really, well, you saw the plane with the turbojet and the rainbow cloud afterwards. I don't know if that's going on. That sort of thing's going on every day, but that's certainly one instance of evidence that I would highlight to him. And look at all these pictures from all around the world. So he ignores time-lapse videos, grid photos, broken trails, low-altitude trails, trails on some days and not others. It's all in a day's work for these people. And then I wrote to the environmental agencies, which are no better. A waste of time, really. Greenpeace never responded to the report, but I then later wrote to them about some other information when they were going on about climate change or some other nonsense that they're involved with. Thanks for your email. It's interesting to hear your views. Views? You call circular trails over the Humber Bridge, over Harrogate and so on, a view. I'd call it evidence myself, but hey ho. As Greenpeace is absolutely going to continue complaining on climate change, well, really? Oh, what if you've got the cause of climate change wrong? Which I would say definitely you have. As it has been internationally for decades, I guess we'll have to agree to differ on this one, and I've taken you off our support list as requested. I did. World Wildlife Fund, I'm sorry you are disappointed by our response. They sent my report back, the paper copy which I sent them to keep. They wasted their own envelopes and postage to send me my copy back, claiming that they didn't have time to investigate. Okay, so presumably you can't go out on your lunch break and look up at the sky a few days in a row. Fair enough. As I am sure you can appreciate, we have limited resources and staff, and we must address the most urgent issues that fall within our mandate. What if you're missing something? I wrote to the CAA. They wrote back. The Civil Aviation Authority, they're responsible for, well, it's interesting to say, what are they responsible for? It says the CAA is not directly involved in managing the traffic flows to and from the airports. That is the responsibility of the airports in conjunction with the relevant air traffic control organisation, for example, the National Air Traffic Service. Therefore, the CAA is not directly involved in placing aircraft over Derby or any other area, neither does it have a remit to place any restrictions on aerial activity over any area for environmental reasons alone. Thus, the CAA does not have access to the information you requested. In other words, because of this grid, I wrote to them and said, look, come on, you should know what aircraft made these grids. If they were made by civilian aircraft, you should be able to tell me which ones they were. You know, each flight has a flight plan. You've got to file a flight plan when you set off. So they should know in their database, in these days of international terrorism where a plane can be hijacked at a moment's notice and crashed into a building. Ha-ha. Not. They should know this stuff. Eventually, as I've come to, I have to take matters into my own hands and gather my own data, which is I've got an example.
Can I interrupt for a moment?
Yes.
A friend of mine showed me an app on his iPhone the other day.
Yes, yeah.
You've seen it?
Yeah,
you
I
can
know
actually
what you mean.
see all the planes above.
Yeah, yeah. I know what you mean. You can't see all of them, though. But yeah, that's right. There is these days with the iPhone. I'll come on to this because I've got an equivalent thing which is called an AirNav radar box. It's an iPhone app where you can actually hold it and point it up at the sky, and it will show you the flight numbers going overhead. Because basically each aircraft, and I'll come to this, has what's called an ADS-B transceiver. It's dual, I don't know, I forget the stands, dual sideband or something transceiver, and that system goes into a web server. The signal goes onto a web server, and then it's broadcast to the iPhone, and it matches it.
20 overhead when you showed me, all going in different directions, and every one you could click on, and it's what
flight number it was
and where it was going to.
Yeah. That's right. You can get a lot of detailed information, and I'll come to an example of that.
What about military planes and military planes?
It doesn't track military planes.
So that's scary for national security.
They use a different system. That's right. But I will come on to something later, but not specifically the iPhone, but as I say, I've got something in relation to that. I also wrote to the Department of Transport and said, it does not hold information on individual aircraft movements. The requirement to monitor air traffic flows, they said it from NATS. And I wrote to NATS as well, and I didn't even get a response from them at the time. National Air Traffic Service. And I also wrote to East Midlands Airport as the most significant airport, because I live near Derby, so I'm nearer to East Midlands Airport than Birmingham International here. But the East Midlands Airport was actually quite interesting in one sense. They were quite helpful actually. It took a while to respond, but it said, these vapor trails are largely the result of aircraft operations at altitudes greater than 15,000 feet. Okay, which is what I already confirmed, what I already knew to be true. And they are unlikely to be associated with East Midlands airports, and we would not be included in our radar recordings. In other words, they only monitor aircraft when it comes 15,000 feet or below, which if you think about it makes sense, because if you've got a busy airport with planes coming in every few minutes, you're not really bothered about what's sailing over the top. You just want to ignore that. You're just interested in the stuff that might be coming into land or is being stacked. So the planes that are being stacked or coming into land, they don't leave a trail. They don't leave a trail at all. So they're not going to come into the equation. And then many flights pass over the middle of Derby, including Derby. Whilst they include aircraft to and from East Midlands at higher altitudes, there are many aircraft associated with operations at other UK airports. And I've picked up aircraft from Air New Zealand and stuff flying over my house. So, so of course then, we have to say, well, it's according to what the CAA tell us and the Department of Transport, it must be all contrails. That's all there is to it. They won't really tell you the conditions, but they say it's all contrails. Right. Well, I think probably I'll just do this next couple of slides and then we'll have a break. We're at 9:15 now. This comes back to what you say about the iPhone app and so on. So let's just put out an idea that somebody is doing some spraying. Who would it be? I decided to spend a wad of cash on one of these things on eBay. It's an off-the-shelf product. I don't have any special access to any equipment. I don't have access to any whistleblowers. I don't know anybody in the security services. I don't know anybody. I'm just me. Going to assess disabled students and writing a bit of software now and again, which I did for this actually. I still got round to finishing that off. But the AirNav radar box, on eBay, picks up ADS-B. I forget what that means, but it's basically a digital signal that's broadcast every few seconds by an aircraft, and you can pick it up with a small aerial about 30 centimetres long. But I found that only about 20% of the aircraft that come over broadcast their position. They broadcast an ADS-B signal, but they don't necessarily broadcast their position. The AirNav radar box can identify the aircraft's registration number, the type of aircraft, the airline, the airspeed, the altitude, the bearing, and the source and destination. And basically, these things cost 400 quid, so they're not cheap. They're a little black box about the size of about 3 CD cases stacked on top of each other. You plug it into your USB, it's USB powered. You put the software on a disk onto your computer, and it comes up with an air traffic controller simulating display. It looks like you're an air traffic controller with it. And so I've left this running. I've still got this. I haven't switched it on for quite a while now, but I did run it for quite a number of days, and it'll actually pick up about 100,000 records in a day. And on one day, which was the 5th of March 2010, I picked up 2 flights. EasyJet flight 067, and it was going from Luton to Glasgow. And the height I picked it up at was, minimum height was 32525, maximum height was 33675, type of aircraft A319-111, and the ground speed was 380 to 390 knots. I think it is rather than miles an hour. I think it's knots. It might be miles an hour, but anyway. And then I picked up another one, and out about just over an hour, about 50 minutes later, 50 odd minutes later. I was going from Stansted to Edinburgh, 32,900, 33,000 feet, same type of aircraft, roughly the same speed. One of these flights was leaving a long persistent trail, and the other one wasn't. So this was leaving a big long trail, and this was a short trail. I know you can't see it so well on this picture. But this was the long trail one. This went right down to the horizon, right down to the horizon. And this was the other EasyJet flight. You can see I photographed it. And then we've got this other longer trail. This aircraft didn't come up on the scanner, so I don't know what that one was. So we've got, hang on a minute, we've got exactly the same type of aircraft, same airline, same day, same height within about 500 feet, same speed. Both UK domestic flights, one's leaving a big long trail, the other one isn't. No one has been able to explain that to me, what the reason for that is. 1 hour apart in time. So I still don't have an explanation. I wrote to EasyJet, and this was the track that came. This is what comes up on the software that you get the AirNav radar box. This is the virtual air traffic controller display. So you can see the height of the aircraft here and stuff with a sort of line graph type thing. And that was the other one. That was the track 2 from the other one. I know you can't see it because the text is all small on that, but that's to show you that I did actually capture these things. So I wrote to EasyJet. And they basically said, and I sent them all these files, sent them the pictures, and said, look, please, can you tell me why one plane's leaving a trail and the other one isn't? You know, I'd really like an explanation for this. If it's an explanation, it's just perfectly mundane, great, fantastic, I'll be happy. I apologise, but I'm unable to answer your operational query, presumably because they assumed I was a terrorist. Would be the reason they would give. That's the sort of brick wall you come up against with this. And nearly everyone that I've spoken to has come up against this brick wall. You will not get an answer to the question. So I think what we'll do then is we'll take maybe, I don't know, 10-15 minutes, whatever's normal. How long do you normally break for?
It's 15 and they're very ambivalent and procrastinate. So yeah, thanks for coming back. As I said, I'm going to welcome Andrew back on, and at the end of the talk, then if we have 10 or 15 minutes of questions.
Yeah, all right then. I'll try and do that. Okay.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Yeah, something. Did you leave something behind? All right. Looking for things.
Oh, they're just going to mill around.
Okay. All right. We'll carry on. We'll carry on now. Thanks for coming back, everyone. And we'll see how we've gone with some of this. So what's in the chemtrails? I mean, we touched on this a little bit. I'll start using this to save my voice a little bit. Many people say there's barium and aluminium. Some tests of water and soil samples seem to show elevated levels of these compounds. Again, I'm not saying the water's been tested everywhere, but it's certainly in California. Rosalind Peterson's done some tests. I believe there are a couple of people in this country who have done tests, and also there's been some being done in Australia as well. And you can find out about that on the internet. My own feeling is that if every single trail that we see contained toxic levels of barium and aluminium, we would all be in much worse shape than we are now. But this idea of putting barium into the atmosphere is sort of interesting, because does anyone know what's special about barium as an element? Anyone know what's special about it when you go to the hospital and stuff? It's radio opaque, because they'll give you a barium meal when they're maybe trying to x-ray blood vessels in your heart, or I think they do when you do an angiogram, they give you it. Because it has this property that it will reflect radio waves back. So it's interesting that might be possibly being put in the atmosphere in some way to change the electrical or radio properties of the atmosphere, possibly. I don't know, but that's one possibility. The thing is that genuinely proving the source of these raised levels of compounds, whether they be barium, aluminium or other things, such as erythrocytes, which they're like red blood cells. These are biological components. These are Clifford Carnicom claims to have found these in some samples. Generally proving that they've come from chemtrails is actually quite difficult if you were to prove it scientifically. We touched on this before. I think there's something to do with weather control going on here. There may be some type of immunosuppression going on. In other words, they're not putting infective agents, some people say, oh, so they're putting all these bacteria and viruses in. I don't really think they can be doing that, because there's some question as to whether these bacteria or viruses would make it coming down from an altitude. Thanks, Andy, very much. Would they make it coming down from such a high altitude to the ground and still be, pathogenic? I don't think so. So I'm not so sure about this biowarfare. Again, it's one of my don't knows. They could be doing something, but I think it's more likely to be chemicals causing immunosuppression if they were going to do that, because then it gives them plausible deniability. Oh, it's just a bug going around, that's why people are getting more illness. But we're getting more things like chronic fatigue and depression, people under high stress. Are the chemicals being sprayed to contribute to these things, dumbing people down? Again, I haven't seen strong evidence to suggest that really is true, but I certainly wouldn't put it out of the question. And again, we've talked about, for example, here people talking about these fibres coming down. And I got an instance of these on my lawn, but again, I think in that case it was probably was just spider webs, because it was in October, and they can be seasonal. But people have talked about these fibres, and then you get into this thing with Morgellons disease, which other people have talked a lot about. I don't know a lot about it. I had somebody contacting me saying they got Morgellons disease, and they sent me all these pictures, and I was trying to make something out of them. They'd actually got a microscope, and I've got one of these microscopes at home. You can get them now, where you get a microscope, I got it off eBay, and you put a webcam into the microscope, and then you can plug that into a USB port and see the microscope on your computer screen, and do videos and stuff. It's really quite useful if you're into that sort of work. And she'd done this with her thing that she said was Morgellons fibres or something. I couldn't see anything. I looked at it and I couldn't see anything. So I've heard about this, but again, there's something going on, but I'm not sure what it is. What I am sure about is that disinformation is being put out deliberately in relation to chemtrails, knowingly, by people who should know better in some cases. For example, this cropped up, let's see, this was 11th of, I always get a US date, so this will be the 11th of May 2008 this came on Rent.com, Rent.com website. Somebody called Ted Tweetmeyer, who runs a site called Data for Science, he said, look, what's this? It's a spray pod, it's a chemtrail spray pod. We've got proof positive that they're putting spray pods out. This is a spray pod exit port. Brightness enhances. It was in shadow of the sun. Brush-like object will provide maximum surface area to create an aerosol. Note the dark battle, which will restrict airflow completely through the aerosol device. Oh, really? Well, actually, it's more likely to be a refueling pod. It's not a chemtrail spray pod. This is one of these things where an aircraft, it will come up to this to get refueled. They'll put a line out of it with one of these funnel type things on the end for mid-air in-flight refueling. It's either one of those or it's some type of smoke generator for purposes I do not know. But that's a military aircraft, obviously. So that's not chemtrails. Now this one, no, this is definitely chemtrails, folks. Look, you can clearly see this one. Look, here's all the tanks. This is inside a chemtrail sprayer plane. This is February 2008, came out on the Cloak and Dagger website originally, and was everyone said yes, proof positive. We know the chemtrailing. This is it. No, I'm sorry. It's actually a flight test aircraft, and what you see in there, as my understanding is, these are basically, this is a Boeing test flight. What they do is they have these tanks full of fluid, I presume water. They pump the fluid around the aircraft under computer control so that they can measure the load on the airframe and see how the aircraft performs with different loads on the airframe, simulating the different distribution of passengers and luggage and so on the airframe. And I think the AC used a similar test flight. I think this was The X-Plane website, I've got this from. People walking around. In fact, what happened with that, I understand this, you can go and read this story, and if I recall it correctly, I read it probably at least a year ago, and I may not be recalling the details, but basically what happened, this was a test flight, I think for a Boeing 777, and they were fairly happy that things were going well with the project, so they invited a few of the staff from the company to go onto the test flight just to see what it was like as part of the testing process and stuff. And one of them from the company, wrote this blog about it and was allowed to take photographs of these tanks again. And you can see they've got some seats here, and then these tanks. So there's all these people here. They wrote about it. So these are just test flights. So, but somebody was claiming, without doing research, that this was definite, 100% proof of tanks with chemtrail spray in them. And that's not proof. That is not proof. It's only what it looks like. And this is what goes on a lot. Same with 9/11. It looks like this, it looks like that, therefore it must be that. No, not necessarily. That's why I'm hedging my bets on a lot of this stuff. Now, the other reason why I know that there's active information being put out and things going on with this, or something going on, messing with your mind on this. Messing with your mind. I say recent, this is probably about a year, in fact, over a year ago now. I was sent a note that the earliest picture of a chemtrail might be one that was caught during the filming of the, I've misspelt it wrong, the railway children in about 1970, but this turned out not to be true. I'll just play this clip. In fact, I thought I'll skip over this, it's getting late. I'll just show you the pictures. Now, what actually happened with this, and you can go and watch this clip on the website if you want. This person wrote to me and said she'd seen a chemtrail in the railway children, but what she'd actually seen was a Virgin Trains commercial from 2005. Right? And what they did in this commercial, some of you might remember it, was they were launching the new Pendolino service around the same time, and they tried to romanticise the train travel by including segments from old films with people like Cary Grant, and there's a sequence with Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis from Some Like It Hot. There's a couple of seconds from that, and they've merged that together. They've done a digital composite and merged that into a more contemporary Virgin Train scene. So in other words, they put Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon onto a Virgin Train, and Cary Grant and I think Ava Gardner was the other lady actress of the time. They put them digitally in a composite onto a Virgin Train. And then within that sequence, they used this shot, which is from the Railway Children. Unfortunately, if you go onto YouTube, you'll find the whole Railway Children film, the wonderful film of the Railway Children. So it's a classic children's story. I managed to track down the two shots. This was from the Virgin Trains commercial, and this was from the original film. Phil Morris, the chap I mentioned earlier, he tracked down who made the commercial, and he wrote to them and said, hang on a minute, what was the reason behind putting this chemtrail in? And they said, well, what we were trying to do is we were trying to bring it up to date and include, contemporary scenes, because of course we added the tree, and then there's a bit of a town and a city. I think there's a high-rise block there if you go and look at it. So we were just adding that in to kind of bring it up to date. But excuse me, they're supposed to be romanticising train travel, so why did they want to put air pollution into it? Isn't that a bit odd? I mean, you might argue, well, of course, Richard Branson's got an airline, Virgin Airlines, so maybe they were subliminally trying to get people to think of that. Why not put a Virgin plane flying across and make it a bit more, obvious, with a logo in it or something? So very strange. And yeah, this was the email that I was telling you about. I won't read it all out. 2000 Virgin going to roll out a new fleet of trains. This is all on my website if you want to go and look at it. It was deemed to be time to address their ultimate ambition to become the nation's transport provider of choice. We want to encourage consumers to make an active, positive choice to take the train rather than driving or opting to fly, and to keep doing so over time. So as you can see, the chemtrails, and that's their word. I forget this lady's name. I do know her name, but I blanked it out. The chemtrails were used as a tool, although subtle, to address the above. They actually admitted they deliberately put it in. That's the point I wanted to stress. They deliberately put that in. It wasn't an accident where they just had a digital composite and it happened to be left in the bit of footage that they used. They deliberately chose to put the trail in the commercial. And I got, in a follow-up email, I got the feeling from that person that she was not very happy about the question. There was something going on behind it. And this is even more severe. Here we have a scene from Over the Hedge, which is a children's film you might have seen. My kids have watched this. And it's a completely CGI film. There's nothing real in it at all. It's all, you know, Toy Story and all those other films now. Completely CGI. Oh, look. Got chemtrails in it. Why would that be? Why not put a balloon, an ordinary cloud, a helicopter, a kite, some of the furniture in the picture? No. It's got to be a persistent aircraft trail that they put in. And I've got a page called, if you Google subliminal chemtrails and possibly my name or check the evidence or something, I've got a whole page of these, similar ones. There's something going on. Somebody's trying to put this into our subconscious. Okay, so now we heard mentioned in the first part this idea of geoengineering. And this is a word that's slowly being brought into the public's vocabulary now. Surely nobody can modify the weather. That's just, you know, hearsay, isn't it? Nobody can do that. Well, there seems to be quite a long history of this if you look at the history books. It seems that operations of geoengineering have been going on for at least 100 years. In 1915, San Diego City Council approached Charles Hatfield to produce rain to fill the Marina Dam Reservoir. He claimed to be a rainmaker. This was his claim. Hatfield, with his brother, built a 20-foot, 6-metre tower beside Lake Marina and was ready, and it was ready early in the new year. In other words, I think 1916, yeah. They used a secret mixture of chemicals, apparently, to waft into the sky. Starting on 5th of January 1916, it rained for 15 days and caused floods and dams to burst. And Hatfield was blamed for the damage. So his project was hugely successful. And Hatfield's story inspired the 1956 Burt Lancaster film, The Rainmaker. So you can go and get that out from Love Film or whatever you get it from these days and see what you think of it. And then, of course, what most people will talk about is cloud seeding. One scientist associated with the invention of cloud seeding is Irving Langmuir. The first attempt at cloud seeding was in Massachusetts, and what happened was they seeded a cloud with crushed dry ice, which is carbon dioxide, frozen carbon dioxide, and snow began falling out of that cloud. So in other words, they caused snow to fall out of the sky by dropping something into the cloud. And noticed atmospheric scientist Bernard Vonnegut is credited with discovering the potential of silver iodide. Silver iodide for the use of in cloud seeding. This property is related to a good match with the lattice constant between the two types of crystal. And what that means is that ice crystals and silver iodide crystals have a similar type of lattice, and then when you put one into the other, you can induce rainfall. Now, it's mostly used now for hail suppression. In other words, they try to get it to rain in stormy states in America, so that it won't fall as the rain won't fall as hail later on. They try and get the rainfall out of the cloud, and you can even find Weather Modification Inc. to do that for you. If you go to weathermodinc.com or weathermod.com, you'll find this information. Also, sorry, I went slightly too far there. Cloud seeding has been used since the 1950s, and it was even used for Project Popeye in Vietnam, where they cloud seeded over the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Vietnam and got it to rain heavily so that it became a mud bath and they couldn't move supplies. That's fairly well documented. Now, more modern geoengineering, in other words, changing the climate, have been proposed by people like Edward Teller. He proposed to make a global sunscreen by putting sulphurous compounds in the upper atmosphere, which we'll come back to in a moment. And articles about this have appeared in The Guardian and The Telegraph. And then the other one, of course, is Alex Jones covered this, one of the interesting stories that he covered a few years ago now. I'll just play the video.
My name is Ben Henderson. I'm the first person in the world to be given credit for using weather control a military weapon system. Oh, I was cleared top secret. I was high to get. I got into in weather modification when I was a farm boy. Never could understand why the clouds wasn't bigger, had a little more shade, and was chopping that cotton. So I got in the Navy I managed to get into meteorology school, and I think that's really where I learned the most of my physics. They sent me to the Hurricane Hunters Squadron in Jacksonville, Florida. We were the first ones to fly into hurricanes for the purpose of modifying them, if you will. That was Project Storm Fury. I began to be extremely confident that we could do whatever we wanted to with a hurricane. The Project Storm Fury had been going on since 1961, and they had already done, or had done 2 experiments, one in 61 and 63. Well, by 1964, when I was there in 1964, I wrote the plan and started to have a track and a mission for every flight that was on the hurricane cloud seeding experiments. On August 18th of 1969, Hurricane Debbie was seeded 5 times at 2-hour intervals, and the maximum wind speeds had decreased from 115 to 80 miles per hour. That's a pretty remarkable reduction of more than 45% damage reduction potential. The storm was left alone on the 19th. On the 20th, went back and seeded that cloud the second time and decreased the winds again to just under 100 miles per hour, or about 24% more damage reduction potential. It's interesting that we were able to do that and can have the results confirmed by Stanford University in 1969. Some wanted to continue hurricane reductions, and the other part did not want to. It was a political football, and there are people that were wanting to do more pure research and less application engineering, wanted to kill Project Storm Fury. So they built up an artificial barrier that prevented hurricanes from ever qualifying to be experimented or seeded for damage reduction. I am terribly disappointed that the government had decided a long time ago not to do this, not to do the hurricane damage reduction anymore. The men, the materials, the aircraft, and all of the other support equipment you need are available today to reduce the damage of hurricanes very significantly. And I'm talking significantly as being more than 35 or 40%. The roof doesn't lift off a house until about 105 miles an hour. If you reduce the damages in hurricanes by 35 or 40%, you're going to save 90% of the damages done by them. But once you get down below 100 miles an hour, there's not a whole lot of damage occurs from the winds and hurricanes. The tack they've taken is that they're willing to spend money they haven't got to repair places that are not repairable, or the people to evacuate and the people come back and our house is blown away. We think that's foolishness. We think that we ought to be trying to save those houses, let the people evacuate, but have them come back to a house with furniture in it. Our aircraft can carry over 400 cloud seeding units. Now, those back in Project Storm Fury days could only carry 52. And the fact that we fly 2.5 times as fast and we know exactly where we are all the time, we feel like we have a much better opportunity, a better chance of reducing these hurricanes by even more than they were able to in Storm Fury. Well, the problem we have right now is that while we've contacted every senator in the U.S. Senate, all 100 of them, we've had one mediocre response from one of them. You get the impression that they just don't care what happens about the hurricanes, and we have presented a proposal to them to do damage reduction, hurricane damage reduction for the year 2006, and it amounts to around $6,000 a month. But we have enough airplanes, we have enough people in our company that we can do that.
So what he was basically saying there was that they can reduce the severity of hurricanes by cloud seeding, but they wouldn't do it, they wouldn't fund it. Which is rather odd, really, because I think it's very sensible if you can reduce the wind speed by cloud seeding to 80 miles an hour. You probably want to do that if it stops people's houses being destroyed. But I think we're going to see one of the reasons why that would never be funded, because the object is not to make hurricane damage less, it's to make it worse, as we'll see. There are some bits of legislation, we've touched on them briefly in some of the clips, and I'll cover some more. There's one in the UK, talking about it last year, or 2010, was it 2009, but I've mentioned that. And then there's this famous bill, this has become quite famous, Congress Bill HR 2977, proposed by the very curious Denis Kucinich, who's quite an odd fellow, but quite pleasant nevertheless. And it was shown that this bill was put before Congress on the 2nd of October 2001. And within that bill, it says, it defines some of the types of weapons which should be, this is called the Space Preservation Act, I think it was called. Let's see. And what they were talking about was trying to ban certain types of weapons and weapon military activity, and they needed to ban such things such as exotic weapons systems, such as electronic, psychotronic, information weapons, chemtrails. The bill actually mentioned chemtrails in the first draft. High altitude, ultra low frequency weapon system, plasma, electromagnetic, sonic or ultrasonic weapons, environmental, climate or tectonic weapons, or extraterrestrial weapons. That was in the first draft. You believe it? Or according to what you read on the internet, again, I'm not sure whether that's true, and that was taken out of the second draft. But what did make it through was this, and this was briefly flashed up in the news report that we saw. The Weather Modification Research and Development Policy Authorization Act of 2005. This was Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison's bill. And it was basically, the central bit of this was, Section 2 said the purpose of this was, it is the purpose of this Act to develop and implement a comprehensive and coordinated national weather modification policy and a national cooperative federal and state program of weather modification research and development. We're going to modify the weather. Get used to the idea. That's what this bill is saying. We're not going to do it just yet, apparently, but that's what we're getting you used to the idea of. Yeah, I'll skip over the UN thing. Now, you can go on to geoengineering option, a last resort against global warming. So once you've got this idea of some global warming cemented into people's brains since the early 80s, and I've watched this develop since then, even before then when I was at school, the late 70s probably.
They were talking about it in some papers in the 1920s.
Well, yeah, I'm sure they were, but in terms of global warming, you know, before the 70s it was always going to be the next ice age. So the late 60s, early 70s, the next ice age is upon us. Then by the late 70s it was global warming.
I can remember growing up that it was normally the left that were promoting global warming and not the established orthodox way of thinking.
Right.
It's quite a fight.
Yes,
to get you know, the green policy
into
place and to get people really
right, and now it's gone completely the other way because we have eco-fascism everywhere. Yeah. You know, I'm not saying we shouldn't look after the environment as such, but it's gone almost in the opposite, to the opposite end of the scale now. And this is an example. This is on Stanford University's website. You go look at it. Look at this: aerosols in the atmosphere, giant reflectors in orbit to get rid of the sun's heat, reflect it back. We'll grow more trees. Chemicals to save ozone, so we're going to put more chemicals in the atmosphere. Cloud seeding, which we've mentioned. Genetically engineered crops. Greening the deserts. Iron fertilisation of the sea. This is Stanford University's ideal environment.
They actually want to reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere to the point where plants won't grow anyway.
Right,
because it
right.
needs to have to be a certain level. And also that bill was put forward by Alfred Weber.
I'm familiar with Alfred Weber, yes, he wanted to sue me, Alfred Weber did. So. You can read about that on my website. He didn't, he couldn't sue me, but because I only posted on my website what he said. But
what would the iron in the water do?
What they plan to do, they put iron filings into the water, and I believe that the certain types of algae feed off the raised iron levels, yeah, and the algae then photosynthesize more. They suck in more of the carbon dioxide from the ocean's surface, and that thereby reduces the level of CO2.
Why did the Weber guy want to sue you?
I'm not going to go into that now. I've got lots more to go through. You can read about it on the website. It's to do with 9/11, basically, in a sentence. So yeah, the world's slow progress in cutting carbon emissions that we're all made of, remember, and we all breathe out, and the looming danger that the climate could take a sudden turn for the worse, require policymakers to take a closer look at emergency strategies. We're all in peril, everyone, oh no, for curbing the effects of global warming from the geoengineering option. You can read that report on the website. It's pretty staggering, really. And then, here in the UK, this never made the news. The regulation of geoengineering they're talking about, this was from March 2010, look. Regulation of geoengineering being talked about in the House of Commons by the Scientific Technology Committee. Really? Are you serious? It's there on the website, you can go and look at it. You can go and read the document. I haven't read the whole document, I just read the title and thought, well...
We can't have those geoengineering running around doing what they want, can we?
Right.
We need some regulation.
The problem is, for these folks, the problem is, as we've already actually covered with Dr. Judy Wood, we've got significant evidence that geoengineering is already going on. Already. Not just cloud seeding like Ben Livingston was doing, something else is going on. I have no doubt about this. I don't know exactly how they're doing it. I have some suspicions.
Wow, look at that. That's got to be Photoshop, man. Come on.
No, that's on the BBC website. I've actually seen...
It looks like a Christmas, like a
right.
card.
It's not Photoshop. It's not Photoshop. It's not Photoshop. This is another one from taken near JFK Airport, November 2004. This is from Orlando, Florida. These are from Scott Stevens' website. I've got these two trails here, chemtrails, call them that. What's this imprint here over them? What's this circular cloud formation here? This is from, I forget where this is from. This is from Scott Stevens' website. And this sort of clump here. And then this straight edge of cloud here. There's something going on here. Does anyone think that's natural? Well, we'll come to who thinks it's natural in a minute. I haven't got any details for that image. That came from another website. I've got several of these now, as you'll see. There's another one. What are these cloud formations? I saw one like this in Borrowash just momentarily, but I didn't have my camera with me. It wasn't quite as overt as this. It was a bit more subtle. But I've seen these things myself. And what the hell is this? This was posted on Coast to Coast website. Right-angled cloud formation with like a gouge of some kind. It's the guy describes it like looking up to the trail of a boat. You know, it's like a boat cutting through the sky, and this trail is left by the propeller spinning. That's how he described it. What the hell is that? These are hole punch clouds, folks. Nothing to comment on. It's just hole punch clouds. That's what they call them, you know. It's like when a plane goes past, it creates an air current, and then this cloud forms. There you go, look. I don't buy that. That's nonsense. Something is going on here. I believe this is some type of energy imprint. That's what you're seeing. Somebody is putting energy into the atmosphere or taking energy out of the atmosphere. And that's what's causing this, and we'll come on to that by that. But look at the good old Cloud Appreciation Society. You can always rely on them to sort things out for us. Look at those nice semicircular clouds, isn't that cool? Those nice natural semicircular clouds. You just see them from time to time and you just, yeah, that's really cool, that. Now, don't worry about this. All we need is a name for this. You don't have to think, what the bloody hell is that? All you need to give it is a name. Asperitas cloud, sorted. Don't have to think about it anymore, according to the Daily Mail. That looks like some lurid scene from the Harry Potter film. And that's in the UK. That was in Scotland somewhere, I believe. That's from a Daily Mail picture. And you can find lots of these pictures if you look for them. What the hell is going on with these undulating, weird optical effects and so on? Now then. See if this works. Come on. Jumpty, jumpty, jumpty. I think this is an audio clip that's trying to play. I'll see if it'll come on. Are you going to do it? Oh, yourself.
What I was looking at was the...
Right, well, I'll just get into play. I'll get him to start again. I don't know why it took so long to load.
What I was looking at was the cold front working through southern Montana, and
yeah, you can actually see it.
You can actually see it, and towards the end of it, it comes to just a sharp endpoint, which is fine. It looks like a needle that we use those old archaic things called LPs or vinyl.
Right.
But a couple of, you can see how the clouds are simply notched at regular intervals.
I do.
You see how about every 4 kilometers, every 4 or 5 kilometers, they're just hatched. And it's the regular interval. And when you begin to climb up from the back of that cold front, there is an opening or a large square. And where that opening begins, the clouds are shifted exactly 90 degrees.
Oh, I do see that.
The cold front moves north, the clouds realign themselves north-southeast or north-south, and then the front continues on.
All right, when you're doing the weather on TV, and I take it you present these sorts of images to your audience, right?
But I haven't pointed them out.
Okay,
not all the time.
So,
after doing this show, I have to.
Yes.
It changes everything. And follow the northern border of Wyoming, and across the valley that includes Billings, Montana, there's a perfectly square cloud.
Okay.
Over towards the east central or the right central portion of the image. Do you see the square cloud and the square shadow below it?
I do.
It's almost as if it's been cut out.
In fact, actually, it's almost exactly square. That is bizarre.
Exactly.
So there's nothing, in other words, normally, meteorologically speaking, there's nothing that would or could create an exact square cloud like that?
Not in that terrain. Not in that terrain. And that's not the only anomaly on the picture.
It is weird.
There are many other anomalies in that image that if you just sit and look at it, the geometry is just wrong.
And that's, you wouldn't know anything because there's only a TV weatherman, Do you believe your own eyes, or do you believe what some think tank in government tells you is going on? And then, of course, we have these, which are radar traces, which you can pick up from time to time. Perfectly natural to have rainfall appearing in a circular pattern, isn't it? The circular cutouts. Everyone sees that all the time. But no, it's not. It's not, Andrew. It's just an instrument anomaly. It just happens. Oh, look. Getting these lines here coinciding with this circular rainfall pattern here and this other circular rainfall pattern here. Just an anomaly that never happens. What's going on with these circular rainfall patterns?
What area is it that's overlying over?
Well, this is the state of Texas here, so this is the bottom corner of Texas. I don't know what this state is here. My geography of the US is not that brilliant, but I know that this one is Texas. That's Texas as well. Yeah, that might be New Mexico over here, possibly. And obviously the Great Lakes here. Something going on in this region. There are many of these anomalies. Many of them. Something is going on.
The colouring on that, is it? Obviously that's the colouring of the rainfall.
It's the amount of rainfall you see here, it gives you, I forget what the scale is. But yeah, so one's high and one's low, but I don't know which is which. I think the blue is highest, I think. So it's varying in intensity. Now you get explanations again for these. They claim that they're things like anomalous propagation. I've got another slide on this. What's this thing here suddenly appearing? What are these bands? What's this? 2002. I've got quite a few of these, so I'll flick through them quickly. We've got this sweep going backwards. This is a bit more subtle. We've got like this sweep of moisture, apparently like a radar going clockwise beam sweep, and you can just see this. It's as if a sweep of rain is going across the whole country. And then what the hell is going on here? This is the one that they claim is anomalous propagation because of the sensitivity of the instruments is at some boundary level. I don't know what the hell is supposed to be going on with all of this here. They claim to explain it, but I don't know what it is. And this is this anomalous propagation where they talk about it. So if you're getting data, the point is if that is meant to be, there's no valid data in that image if that's to do with some anomaly of some kind. The anomalies are so big that they drown out the normal data in that image. That's the problem I have with that. So what's going on? Now then. Musical interlude. got the hang of that. It appeared that there was some correlation between when these trails formed and when the thunderstorm occurred. I don't know, but it looked mighty strange to me to have no trails visible in the sky for that period, and then 7 trails, possibly 8, I may be miscounted, and then they appeared right over where the thunderstorm became most powerful. Was that coincidence? Maybe. Maybe. Not proof, but again, I think there's something going on with that. This is another one of these radar rings. Again, this is all over the world. This is over Switzerland, and somebody said that this was a UFO that they picked up, and there's a kind of, not exactly entirely joking, but not entirely serious either. What's this? This made a little bit of a flap on the internet as well. Australia as well. This was their own radar weather system, and this got onto one of the Australian newspapers as well. So we're seeing these circular anomalies all over several different countries. There's something strange going on here. Has it got anything to do with this? I'm not going to go too much longer, but I think it's got something to do with this. Wilhelm Reich is certainly not talked about all that much in relation to weather modification. He studied etheric energy. He studied orgone energy, and he claimed that it was the energy from which everything else is made. Some people might call it etheric energy, 0-point energy, vacuum energy. But also Reich came into this through studying human sexuality. It was in this area of research that he worked as an assistant to Sigmund Freud. He was studying the interaction between people with the way that they interacted with their sexual relationships, and the energy that seemed to come out of that in certain ways. Reich constructed and conducted experiments with orgone accumulators, which he used these, and he measured the temperature outside of them. An orgone accumulator is basically you build a box, and you have layers around the box with alternating fiberglass and steel wool, which are correspondingly inorganic and organic materials. And within this central area, you get the orgone energy accumulated. And there are certain beneficial effects to this, as Reich found, and he used to treat people with cancer, he used to treat people with other problems. And I know people, and in fact, I meant to talk to the gentleman here tonight who's been selling the orgonite pieces as well, because that's what this comes into, and I didn't mean to have a word with him, I got tied up with somebody else. And what Reich did in the 50s was he made something called cloudbusters. And I've got a clip of Peter Robbins talking about this. And there were cloudbusters actually set up at Benton Waters Base, where they had the UFO situation in 1980. But I'm not going to play that clip, I'm just going to go on. And people have rebuilt these and claimed that they've, Joe DeMeo is one person who's rebuilt them and used them and remotely operated. And they can actually make clouds disappear. Charles R. Kelly in the 1960s reproduced some of the experiments, and as you see here, was able to make these clouds disappear, and he repeated these experiments.
Well, Reich was actually creating rain, not dispersing
it. Right. Yeah, he was doing both, I think. He was using them both for, he was basically using them for some type of weather manipulation.
There's definitely reports of him
going
into fields where there's been drought and creating rain.
Yeah. I think his whole method was that his claim was that he could move this orgone energy around and thereby manipulate the weather to either stop rain or make it happen. I think that was his basic thrust of what he was saying. Now, you might have even heard of this. And that was basically a snatch of the Kate Bush song, the lovely cloud busting song. Of course, it off slightly early, but there's only a little bit more. And that you can see, you're making rain. That was in the lyrics, and you're just in reach. That was about this book, the Book of Dreams. I've actually got a PDF copy of this that somebody sent me recently. I've not got round to reading it yet. Now, the cloud busting song that Kate Bush wrote, she wrote it having read Peter Reich's Book of Dreams. Peter Reich was Wilhelm Reich's son, where he told the story of how his father was, basically ended up in prison and so on. He was, you know, he was working with the government, or they tried to stop him doing what he's doing. I don't really know the whole story, but that's what the song is about.
Contempt of court.
Yeah, ultimately he was because of his. I know that part of the story. He was using the orgone accumulators for treating people, and then he was exporting them out of the state, and he took it.
No, he was going into the desert, into the Arizona desert, to test them in the desert in severe conditions to really prove that they work. And this woman basically went to the court and said, you know, he's claiming to cure cancer,
yes.
He's not proved any, he's la la la. So the court then asked him to prove his work in the court.
Yeah, that's right.
And he said, I'm sorry, science is for peer review and peer approval, not for a judge to decide.
That's right, but they needed to prosecute him, and the way they prosecuted him was because he'd broken state law.
It was because he refused to appear in court. It was contempt of court.
Yeah, well, I mean, I heard that he was summoned to court because he, you know, he took something out of the state, one of these orgone accumulators, into a state where they weren't allowed, and they prosecuted him on that.
Why wouldn't they be allowed? You know, they were
because he was practicing medicine. He was practicing treatment without a license. I don't know if that's the true story. That's the story I read.
No, we're not here for Wilhelm, right? We're getting sidetracked.
He wasn't treating anyone with them. He was treating.
Right. Well, that was the story I heard. It could be a different story. I don't know if it's true, but that was the story that I heard. And everyone, I've got to mention HARP. Everyone talks about HARP. I'm not going to talk about it that much. You can go and research this yourself. But this is an ionospheric heater. It's got a website in Gakona, and the place is in Gakona, Alaska. It's run in part by the US Defense Department. Claimed to be putting, I think, 1 million watts into the atmosphere. But some people claim it's 1,000 times that amount of energy being put into the atmosphere to achieve effects on the ionosphere. Supposedly, they say, to manipulate communications and so on. And they say, you know, putting 1 billion watts into the atmosphere, nothing to worry about, but of course you should be worried about these people with box cutters hijacking planes, you know. So don't worry about what we're doing, that's what you should be worried about. But there is also, I discovered more recently, according at least to a chap called Gary Vay, there is a secret HARP facility, a second one in Alaska at Poker Flats. If you go on to if you search for Gary Vay and Poker Flats HARP, you'll find out about the story of that, some of which I've posted on my website. And there's also the Ice Cap facility in Norway. There's one in Russia. There's, I believe, one in Australia somewhere. But again, I don't know all the details. I'm not going to spend a lot, because there's a lot of bunk being talked about HARP. It's used for mind control. It's used to create earthquakes. It's used to trigger the Asian tsunami and the Japan earthquake, and you know, it's blamed for just about everything, you know, and they're using it, waiting for Planet X to appear so they can switch on HARP and destroy the world. I mean, you know, I don't know. Some of it might be true. I think a lot of disinformation has been circulating, but we do know it is a real facility, and I certainly would be more than happy if they switched it off, frankly. Yeah, and I've talked about Gakona. I was getting ahead of myself. So that's that. Nick Begich talks a lot about HARP, but let's see what else he talks about. Let's see if we can get the right clip here.
In your opinion, Nick, what do you think HARP is being used
I didn't
for?
want that one. I've got to go back and get the short one. Beware Nick Begich, folks.
Nation, we're in a conflict in Iraq, as an example, and we're there to win the hearts and minds to spread democracy. But that's not what the people apparently want. They want a theocracy, and if that's what they want, in their own right to self-determination, maybe we need to recognize individual sovereignty as long as they keep it within the boundaries of their country and learn to leave people alone. We're the only country in the world with 800 bases and stations around the world to monitor and interfere with everyone else's politics. Maybe it's time to pull back a little bit towards our own borders, allow some governments to function. If they violate another state, if they violate the United States, I say stomp them into the Stone Age, as we did in Afghanistan. When we said give those guys up and they didn't do it, I think we were fully justified.
Nick Begich says they didn't give up the hijackers from Afghanistan, so America was fully justified in stomping them back into the Stone Age. Does that sound like there's something coming out of the mouth of an enlightened and knowledgeable person about 9/11? Well, you know, you can form your own opinion. Obviously, I'd form mine, else I wouldn't have put this slide in the presentation. Cloudbusters, yeah, I mean, somebody was asking me about these. They do appear to have some effect. Again, I've heard other people say that sometimes they seem to work, sometimes they don't. You can construct them fairly easily. You can buy them on the internet. There's the Blue Sun website. There are instructions to make your own. Copper pipes, crystals, orgonite, crystals and so on. I'm not going to go into the details here. I want to show you a bit about the hurricane manipulation. What's going on here? What are these lines coming into the storm here? This is heavier rainfall, but it's all in a line. Tuning fork patterns. It looks like a tuning fork. Very strange. That's from Hurricane Ophelia. And of course, like when we were here last time, we looked at this. This is a real humdinger for architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. They don't talk about this. In fact, almost nobody, even though we've been talking about it for almost 4 years now, almost no one would, even Richard Hoagland won't talk about this. Richard Hoagland talks about hurricane manipulation. It's in the shape of a pentacle. Why is this behind the shape of a pentacle? That's the plume of material coming from the World Trade Center on 9/11. I don't say smoke because it wasn't smoke.
Well, that's coming from the Twin Towers.
Well, what was left of them, yes. You can go and look it out. And we had somebody came onto the radio and said, Judy Wood is a liar, there was no hurricane on 9/11. Hurricane Erin was from 2004. And the person running the programme allowed that disinformation to stand for 40 minutes during the programme. It is a simple task to go to the Hurricane Data Centre and look for Hurricane Erin's path. The weather news reports didn't really report Erin very much. We've got the 4 of them, 2 of them named, 2 of them reported the hurricane, 1 reported it by name. That's what it looked like from space on the 10th. Let's see. I'm going to skip over this because, again, the thing about Hurricane Erin, which to me is a slam dunk, takes you on totally onto a different level of things. Started on the 1st of September in the Atlantic, travelled up towards Bermuda, did a bit of damage on the 7th, which was reported by CNN. They said it on CNN, now to worry about, it's going out to sea, forget it. Yeah, you did go out to sea. Went for 4 days in a straight line to New York, towards New York City. Still 500 miles off the coast. You couldn't really see it from New York, but its influence was felt with dry thunder reported at all 3 New York airports, JFK, LaGuardia and Newark. All reported dry thunder, which means the storm's influence was felt there. And then on the 12th of September, it made a right-hand turn and went off out towards Newfoundland. Now, when I wrote to the Act on CO2 government propaganda agency to try and get us to cut our CO2 emissions, and said, so hang on a minute, you're talking about climate change and so on. Well, climate change caused this hurricane to go in a straight line for 4 days, just before the events of 9/11 unfolded, and be closest to New York City at 8 o'clock in the morning, an hour before those terrible events started to unfold. Of course, they didn't have an answer for me except, oh, it was hurricane season in September. Yes, I did know that, but this was at 8 AM in the morning of 9/11. Don't you find this peculiar? I do. But apparently nobody else does. So here we are.
But are you trying to say then that they basically diverted the hurricane so that they could carry out?
The hurricane had something to do with the events of 9/11. Precisely what is not clear, but it's to do with energy. And that's why I think Wilhelm Reich somehow comes into it somewhere. If you read the book that I've got, you'll get a bit more information. Or if you look at Dr. Judy Wood's website, you'll get a bit more information. I'm going to go to the end before doing any more questions. Now, magnetometer data from 9/11. Let's see. World Trade Center 1 gets a hole at 8:46. Excuse me, but this was recorded in Alaska, 3,500 miles away from New York City. Why have we got a dip in the Earth's magnetic field and then a recovery precisely when the supposed first plane hit the World Trade Center? And this is a plot that Dr. Judy generated herself from the Alaskan magnetometer data. 6 instruments show the minimum strength of the Earth's magnetic field was precisely 846, was when World Trade Center 1 got its hole. So you trying to tell me that a plane crash can be detected by the Earth's magnetic field 3,500 miles away. And in fact, not only that, but the Earth's magnetic field, if you look at this carefully and think about it a bit more, apparently the Earth's magnetic field detected the plane approaching the World Trade Center 20 minutes earlier, because that's when it started to deflect. See, what you're looking at here is not evidence of a plane, but evidence of an energy effect, a build-up of energy affecting the Earth's magnetic field. Yeah, I've got a lot more. I don't have time to go into this. But just on this theme, the guys that are running the planet, or the girls, or the aliens, or whoever they are, they've got to tell you what they're doing. Because they use some occult kind of mechanism or something. I don't quite understand it. But there is something occult going on. There's an undercurrent to all of this, and there's a backdrop to it. So I think the rules of the game are they've got to tell you what they're up to somehow. Either subconsciously with subliminal messages, or even more overtly, such as Secretary of Defence William Cohen, nice British name there. Other terrorists are engaging even in an eco-type terrorism whereby they can alter the climate. This is 1997. Set off earthquakes, volcanoes, remotely through the use of electromagnetic waves. Oh really, William? How interesting is that? So there are plenty of ingenious minds out there at work finding ways in which they can wreak terror upon other nations. It's real, and that's the reason why we have to intensify our counter-terrorism efforts. Oh really? Perhaps we didn't need the word counter there in that. And then it makes sense. So, my conclusion from what I've shown you tonight, I still don't know what chemtrails are. I think that somehow the weather modification is a big factor in what's going on. Whether chemtrails cause it or used for it, or the other way around, chemtrails are a result of weather modification, which I was talking to somebody in the interval. I'm not totally sure, but I think we have to try and look at it both ways round. You're still not going to get any official answers out of this. You shouldn't believe me. I'm just a software engineer. I don't know anything about climate, you know. So, you know, you can't take what I say. Global warming and climate change, it's a complete scam, I'm sorry. It's a total scam. Not only because of the CO2 nonsense, which is nonsense in itself, and that report that some of you thankfully have grabbed copies of, I think proves that beyond any doubt. You know, but also because of the fossil fuel scam. We don't need fossil fuels. We haven't needed them for 100 years. And that's why Tesla, that's why Reich were taken out of the picture as quickly as possible, because they had ways to get energy without using fuel, at least not in the way we use it now. All the scientists who refuse to acknowledge the evidence that I've shown you tonight will come to the wrong conclusions. All the government think tanks are all wrong. Simple as that. But of course, who's going to believe me? I'm just some guy from Borrowatch. I don't know anything. Who am I to be saying these heretical things? So again, you're going to have to make your own minds up. You can't take my word for it, because I'm nobody. So it's all part of this giant hoaxing and scamming that goes on, and it's so big and so persistent and so successful and so pervasive that nobody even realises it's going on. Just as an example, if you look at this ClimateGate thing, I've just completed Mike's nature trick of adding in the real temperatures to each series for the last 20 years, from 1981 onwards and 1961, to hide the decline. The Hadley Research Unit, to protect their funding, falsified the data and their conclusions. And they admitted it privately in emails which were leaked just before the Copenhagen summit, about a week before. So all the global warmings, you know, people say, oh, we know global warming is a hoax because of these emails, and they all say, no, it isn't, because of this. No, they are round and round and round, and no one looks at Hurricane Erin. Nobody talks about it. So that whole circus goes round and round and round, and these huge things right above your head, nobody even notices them. And that's how it works. That's how the cover-ups keep going, and that's how it works with a lot of this stuff. So yeah, that's the thing. You've already talked about that, and I think we've just come to the end now. So yeah, you've already taken that. So that's my site, and I've got some more leaflets if anybody wants a few, because I've got a few left in my box. So if you haven't got a leaflet and you want one, let me know. I'll get you one. So that's it, folks. Thank you very much for staying to the end.
want to take 5 minutes?
Yeah, anybody who wants questions? Well, I've got to go.
If everyone goes, thank you very much, that was very well described, and it seems to have summarised everything that was... oh no,
Yes, sir.
Earlier on in the talk, you showed some satellite pictures.
Okay.
I've been trying to find a way of seeing the Earth from above.
Right.
Because as my neighbour was saying, he was coming back from Spain. As soon as he came over Britain,
okay,
he noticed that the cloud cover was very strange.
Okay.
I think what he'd seen was chemtrails, but how do you find these pictures?
There's one of the best satellites to use is called MODIS. MODIS, M-O-I-D-S. M-O-I-D-S. The MODIS satellite. I forget the exact website name. Again, if you take a leaflet and email me, I'll track down the URL for you and I'll send it to you. They don't do. They do full colour, high resolution images, but it's not a daily. They don't, because of the orbit of the satellite, there isn't a 24-hour daily readout. I think it goes over once every couple of days or something. And they have an archive that you can look into. And there's some very interesting images in there. And this Phil Morris guy that I mentioned, he sent me some from time to time. I think it's modis.net. I think try www.moids.net. I think that might be the site, but I could be wrong. Gentleman back there.
Do you think it's the continuation of Tesla's work?
Weather control, to some extent, involves Tesla technology, I think, or something related to that. But I mean, Tesla wasn't specifically into weather modification as such. I think he may have discovered parts of it as a side effect of what he was doing. I think it's more Wilhelm Reich's ballpark.
Back here.
Yeah.
Don't you think there was a strange occurrence with what happened with Richard Branson? His island got blown up and he really got killed.
No, I didn't hear about that. No.
The same thing which you had described, right, with the hurricane and 9/11.
Okay.
Yeah, was the same scenario that happened with Richard Branson on his island with Gwyneth Paltrow, I think. Yeah.
Right.
And that then developed into the hurricane that hit America just the other day.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So this is recent then?
Yeah, very recent. And Richard Branson has been having arguments with the globalists over...
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I'm not quite sure to what to make of Richard Branson, but...
Yeah, the lottery, right, because he grasped them up.
Yeah.
And if you look at the lottery side, it is big business because it's 666.
What's interesting as well, talking about things like that, for example, I know I seem like I'm going off left field here, but another figure that comes up in these funny things is Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney talks about having a concert, and I think it might have been Glastonbury, I could be wrong, but I think it was in the UK somewhere, and it was awful weather, it had been awful weather all week, and he just said something like, well, when I have my set on, it's going to be fine weather, the rain's going to clear, and everyone, oh, yes, Paul, yes, Paul. And it actually happened. And if you watch that DVD, Don't Talk About the Weather, that clip is in there. I think it was on Have I Got News For You that this story was told. And there are several instances like that where certain figures have talked about controlling the weather and then it's actually happened, and that was one of them. So, it does make you wonder if
it's like what they were saying, if you put the pieces together.
Right.
What happened, a bolt of lightning hit his secluded island in the Caribbean,
Yeah.
His mother nearly got killed. Gwyneth Paltrow was with him.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, she had to rescue the mother.
Cool.
Then, the very same lightning that hit the island seemed to develop and then went on to threaten America.
Yes.
A couple weeks
I'll check it. I'll be interested. I'll check that. Lady, you had a question. Thank you.
Yeah, I forgot because I was listening then.
Right. Gentleman in the brown jacket.
I must have been checking out the 9/11 stuff and eventually heard some conspiracy about holographic planes.
Right. Yes.
So I started looking through Google and stuff, and if you type in holographic planes US Army into Google, you might have to search a bit, but you'll find a document from the US Army.
I think I know the one you mean. Go on, yeah.
Holographics. But in a nutshell, At the bottom, you've got a list of all different agencies involved in this project of holographics. And a lot of them seem to be weather modification.
Oh, really?
This, that, the other, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'd not seen that link before. That's interesting.
And the actual diagram is it's like it's pointing down as if the observer would be looking up.
Okay.
And it seems to have a lot to do with reflection, you know what I mean, reflective. This,
right.
That, the other. So I was just wondering, do you think there's any link to do with...
Again, it's possible.
You mentioned 9/11 with the cloud as well.
It's possible.
It's James Bond.
Some type of
James Bond, isn't it? James Bond's last James Bond was water was being...
Sorry, I don't know your name.
That's all those chemtrails. Now, what I was going to say is, yeah, more to do with the stock market and things like that. Is there any links, have you ever noticed, to do with like weather modification and the oil price and things like that? Because obviously it'd be very handy, wouldn't it?
I've never tried to correlate it.
They like to think that they can, if they can control the weather, they can correlate, you know, with, for instance, with the oil and things like that, if it's at a high price at the time, that type of thing.
Well, again, I've never correlated that, but certainly if you listen to what Ben Fulford has said in the past, for example, if you look at some of the events that have happened, and that's mentioned in the Ben Fulford clip, when the Haiti earthquake happened, the US Navy were right, you know, just off the island, conveniently on a military exercise a couple of days before. The same thing happened with Myanmar cyclone, where the US Navy was literally, you know, a few hours from the shores or something, or a day's sailing, and normally they'd be like 2 weeks sail away, you know. And there's several events that have happened like that, where we seem to have had weather events of them seem manipulated and being used to manipulate governments. But you don't see the link unless you entertain the concept of weather control. I'm just this gentleman.
Okay. Have you looked at which countries get sprayed and which countries do not get sprayed, and find any links there?
Not exclusively. What I've been sent specifically for my own, you know, for my own things that have been sent to me. I've been sent pictures from Australia, from the US, obviously from around the UK. I've been sent some from Greece and a few other European countries. I've not seen any from China or Russia or any places like that. Again, if you look at the satellite photographs, it does tend to seem that it's global. Some people have claimed that it's centred over areas of population, but I think if you look at enough pictures, you'll find that that's not always the case. This Phil Morris guy, he sent me some over the Red Sea, I think it was, or is it the Red Sea? He sent me a lot of those pictures of chemtrails over the Red Sea. So again, I don't know. I don't know if there are countries that have more trails, or whether there's a correlation to civilian air traffic, or, you know, I haven't looked into those questions. Any other questions?
I think you need a break. I think we've got to say thank you very much, Sam.
Thank you.